Okay, while I was focusing on the Armenian case in the past week, lots of developments happened on the Syrian scene that I want to wrap up in this video. First of all, Hamas, the Palestinian armed organization, which severed its ties with Syria in the past 11 years after the regime change war on Syria because they preferred to join the Qatari-Turkish alliance, and they preferred their ideological affiliation, which is the Muslim Brotherhood or Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, and they have become part of the regime change war against Syria, despite the fact that Syria has provided logistical, military, political, and all sorts of support to Hamas in the past few decades. With the admission and confession of Hamas. However, Hamas joined, as I mentioned, the opposition side, and some of their military officers, experts, they have provided all sorts of military expertise to the terrorist organizations in Syria, including Jabhat al-Nusra or Al-Nusra Front or Al-Qaeda, especially in Al Yarmouk camp, the Palestinian camp in Damascus, and they have aided Al-Qaeda there. They have taught them, they delivered their experience in digging tunnels and fighting guerrilla warfare in like all sorts of fighting techniques. Anyways, now Hamas says that they have resumed ties with Syria. Hamas yesterday, this was a few days ago, so on the 15th of September, yesterday, announced its decision to officially restore relations with Syria. Of course, they call it Syrian regime, President Bashar Assad. Anyways, 10 years after severing these relations. Hamas said in a statement that it would continue to build and develop solid relations with the Syrian regime in the service of our nation and its just causes, with the Palestinian cause at its core, especially in light of the accelerating regional and international developments that surround our cause and our nation. The movement expressed its appreciation to the Syrian leadership and people for their role in standing by the Palestinian people and their just cause. So seriously, the question here is, if Hamas knew all this time that Syria supported the Palestinian cause and supported the Palestinian factions politically, diplomatically, and even militarily, and this is a proven fact that Syria provided lots of military expertise to the Palestinian factions, armed factions, in the past decade. Why have they chosen to be on the side of Qatar and Turkey, well knowing that this is a plot against Syria for its foreign policies? Nobody from the anti-Syria camp, they fought against Syria because it lacks democracy or human rights or any other cliches that we hear in the media. They fought against Syria because of its foreign policy. So if Hamas joined the other side, that means Hamas accepted to be a pawn, to be a tool against Syria for its instrumental role in countering the hegemony of the United States and Israel in the region. Now, I said on Twitter that I will make sure that Hamas is unwelcomed in Syria, and it received some backlash. I will just share with you this tweet, because in my opinion, this is very important, and why I take this position, I will also explain to you. So this is the tweet. Hamas says it has restored ties with Damascus. Personally, I will make sure to make them feel unwelcome in Syria, especially the gang of Khaled Mish'al and Ismail Haniyeh. And this is a verse from a Sunnah. It's an Islamic, I would say, Sunnah. The believer should not be stung from the same hole twice. And it received so much, like people start making fun of this, and of course some people, I would say. And the reason for this, why I posted this, it's very simple. They asked me, why don't you say the same thing about the UAE? Why don't you say the same thing about Saudi Arabia or Turkey when there is an attempt or efforts for reconciliation? The reason is very simple. Because these countries were not receiving aid by Syria. This is a very big difference. So you have Hamas, okay? Hamas was received all sorts of support from Syria, and you have Qatar, okay? Qatar doesn't need Syria. Hamas needed Syria, and Hamas received all sorts of support from Syria. So when a war erupts and Qatar sides on the opposite side of Syria, you don't really blame that side because they were never an ally of Syria. But Hamas was an ally of Syria, and they received, as I mentioned, all sorts of support from Damascus. So there is this Arabic saying, or even it's the same in Armenian, even the dog doesn't bite the hand that feeds him, right? So this is why I am very much against Hamas restoring ties with Damascus. Of course, the Syrian leadership has its own calculations, and I don't blame them. They want to finish this war, right? But I'm talking on a popular level as a Syrian citizen and as a person who would encounter these Hamas people once again in Syria maybe one day. So I'm not going to put hands in their hands. I will always be suspicious of them, and I will consider them as a scorpion that they can sting you at any moment. So I would never trust them again. Now, at the same time, like in parallel of what's happening in this case, there are some developments on the Qatari side. So this is from a Syrian journalist, Rania Zanoun. She works for Syrian media outlets. So these are pictures from Qatar. This is the head of the Syrian Federation of Football, and this is the head of the Qatari Federation of Football, and they have met in Qatar to to boost the relations on sports level. So, I mean, this would not have happened unless the muddy waters are being maybe cleaned between Qatar and Syria. This is just my observation, but the bigger picture in this, why all these developments are happening, in my opinion, it's related to the efforts of rapprochement between Turkey and Syria. This is the bigger picture. Reuters published yesterday an exclusive material, and I have verified the information, and I think it is correct. With a Russian nudge, Turkey and Syria step up contacts. Turkey's intelligence chief has held multiple meetings with his Syrian counterpart in Damascus over the last few weeks, a sign of Russian efforts to encourage a solution between states on opposite sides of Syria's war, 4 sources told Reuters. A regional source, who is aligned with Damascus, told Reuters that Hakan Fidan, who is the head of Turkey's national intelligence organization MIT, and Syrian intelligence chief Ali Mamlouk met as recently as this week in the Syrian capital. Like we're talking about just a few days ago. The only thing is about this, like if Hakan Fidan flew to Damascus, how couldn't we track the plane? So I don't know which plane he used, maybe a Russian one. That's why we couldn't know it. The contacts reflect a Russian policy shift as Moscow steels itself for a protracted conflict in Ukraine and seeks to secure its position in Syria where its forces have supported President Bashar al-Assad since 2015, according to 2 Turkish officials and the regional source. Any normalization between Ankara and Damascus would reshape the decade-long Syrian war. This is very accurate. I mean, were it not for Turkey, even if the United States tried, Jordan tried, Saudi Arabia tried, Qatar tried, Israel tried, all these nations who tried to overthrow the government, destroy the infrastructure, but were it not for Turkey, tens of thousands of multinational jihadists wouldn't be able to reach Syria. This is the fact. Turkey played the most destructive role in the Syrian war in regards to opening the borders to the multinational jihadists who formed later ISIS, al-Nusra, and even aided the other moderate so-called rebels in Syria. So the Turkish backing has been vital to sustaining Syrian rebels in their last major territorial foothold in the north, but they still call them rebels. It's like even the Pentagon says Idlib is the largest safe haven for Al-Qaeda terrorists in the world, but The media still calls them rebels. After Assad defeated the insurgency across the rest of the country, aided by Russia and Iran. But rapprochement faces big complications, including the fate of rebel fighters and millions of civilians, many of whom fled to northwest to escape Assad's rule. Look, the term escape here is problematic in my opinion, because in every geography where the Syrian army liberated from the Islamist terrorists, they have given an opportunity to anyone, including civilians and armed militants, that if you lay down your arm and you do and you participate in a reconciliation program, nobody will touch you. You will not be persecuted. You will not be sent to jail. They will drop all the charges against you, etc., etc. So basically a pardon, right? So those who wanted to go to Idlib, they chose to go to Idlib. They didn't escape. They chose to go to Idlib because otherwise they were able to stay. And there are so many so-called former rebel militants and even officers, or call them like seniors among them. People are seeing them nowadays in the streets in Damascus and elsewhere, and they are wondering what the fuck they're doing in the streets, right? But this is how the Syrian leadership sees. They want to finish this war. They are offering pardons. They're offering solutions. So they didn't basically escape. They chose to go to Idlib. Now, Turkey, a NATO member country, has troops on the ground across the area deemed occupying forces by Assad. I mean, according to international law, they are occupying forces, not according to Assad. Turkey is not invited to Syria, and there is no Security Council mandate, so it's illegal. So this is not Assad's claim. This is a legal perception of the occupation forces of Turkey in Syria. During the meetings, Fidan, one of President Tayyip Erdogan's closest confidants, and Mamluk evaluated how the two countries' foreign ministers could eventually meet, according to a senior Turkish official and a Turkish security source. Russia wants Syria and Turkey to overcome their problems and achieve certain agreements which are in the interest of everyone, both Turkey and Syria, said the Turkish official. One big challenge is Turkey's desire to include Syrian rebels in any talk with Damascus. I mean, this is, in my opinion, it's a very difficult task and it's a very difficult demand. And I rule out the possibility that Damascus would accept that. So, the Turkish security official said Russia has gradually withdrawn some military resources from Syria in order to focus on Ukraine and had asked Turkey to normalize relations with Assad to accelerate a political solution in Syria. The Damascus allied source said Russia had nudged Syria to enter talks as Moscow seeks to nail down its position and that of Assad in the event it must redeploy forces to Ukraine. Russia has sustained stunning losses on the ground in Ukraine over the past week. The most recent meeting, including a 2-day visit by Fidan to Damascus at the end of August, so we were talking just 2 weeks ago, had sought to lay the ground for sessions at a higher level, so it means the foreign ministers now. The senior Turkish official said Ankara doesn't want to see Iranian or Iran-backed forces already widely deployed in government-controlled parts of Syria, plugging gaps left by Russian withdrawals. This and that. A diplomat based in the region said Russia had pulled a limited number of troops out of Syria's south earlier this summer, particularly in areas along the border with Israel, I mean with the borders with occupied Golanites, that were later filled by Iran-aligned forces. While Fidan and Mamluk have spoken intermittently over the last 2 years, the pace and timing of recent meetings suggest a new urgency to the contacts. The regional source allied to Damascus and the second senior pro-Assad source in the Middle East said the Turkish-Syrian contacts had made a lot of progress without giving details. Okay. A third regional source aligned with Damascus said Turkish-Syrian relations had begun to be solved and were advancing to a stage of creating a climate for understanding. The source spoke on condition on anonymity. They don't want to mention their names, but the core of the reportage is correct. So it's the unthinkable becoming thinkable. Yeah, nobody thought that this could come. Nobody. I mean, Erdogan called Assad a terrorist. Assad called Erdogan a thief for stealing Syrian land and also the infrastructure and factories, etc., etc. But in an apparent change of tone last month, Erdogan said he could never rule out dialogue and diplomacy with Syria because Erdogan faces tight election. I made a video about this. You can watch it in the previous videos. Erdogan faces tight elections next year in which a key issue will be repatriating some of the 3.7 million Syrian refugees now in Turkey. So, of course, also Turkey needs Syria in this regard, right? And Syria also, in my opinion, if they neutralize Turkey from this conflict, it would be, in my opinion, 70 to 80% of the Syrian conflict would be resolved, in exception to the eastern shores of the Euphrates where the Americans are occupying. And I think that would also bring Turkey on the side of Russia and Syria in demanding the United States to withdraw, because the United States is aiding and supporting the Syrian Democratic Forces of the YPG. So Syrians and the Turks, they also perceive the YPG as a separatist movement that they don't want to have bigger influence in this region. Now, if we move into the last article, I think this is also very important. The newspaper Hurriyet, which is close to Erdogan expresses interest in meeting al-Assad in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit, which happened just yesterday. As Ankara attempts to mend relations with Damascus, Erdogan expresses his disappointment about the absence of the Syrian president at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in a meeting behind closed doors. In an article written by Abdulkader Selvi in the pro-Erdogan newspaper Hurriyet, it was revealed that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has expressed that he had interest in meeting his Syrian counterpart, President Bashar al-Assad, had he attended the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Uzbekistan. However, al-Assad didn't participate in the summit. So we know this, the Reuters, they are mentioning here. Selvi, the author, stated that Erdogan made these statements about al-Assad at a meeting between him and his ruling party behind closed doors on Monday. He said, "I wish Assad came to Uzbekistan. I would have spoken to him, but he cannot come there." So, this is another very important incident, and I'm not sure if it's true, but it would make sense now. Turkey informed Syrian opposition coalition of need to leave. On Tuesday, informed sources told Sputnik that a Turkish intelligence service informed the members of the so-called Syrian opposition coalition of the need to leave the Turkish territories by the end of this year. The sources added that this statement, which constitutes a turning point for this political entity whose activities are based in Turkey, came after a political decision that was taken in Turkey recently against the background of the Turkish-Syrian rapprochement under the auspices of Russia. Sputnik revealed that President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's government decided to close all offices of the opposition coalition in Turkey and to stop funding its members in accordance to a specific timetable that ends by the end of this year at the latest. The sources added that a number of members of the Syrian opposition coalition were informed by the Turkish security services that they need to find another place to carry out their political activity outside the Turkish territories. Maybe they should go to Israel. That's the only place I think they would be received with open arms outside the Turkish territories, and to end all political and media activities related to this coalition by the end of this year at the latest. I still remember in 2013, I participated in a debate in the American University of Cairo with another, it was a televised debate in Arabic, and the counterpart was an opposition figure. She was a woman. And I still remember back then in 2013, I think I was 24 years old or something. And I said, when two states, even though they are now in an infighting mode, when two states have mutual interests, they would step over the tools that they're using against each other. The tools are always being used as a lemon. They squeeze them, they later throw them in the trash. And because of that statement, I received so much hate from the audience in 2013. Remember, this was the era when the Muslim Brotherhood was ruling Egypt. So all these Muslim Brotherhood fanatics were there attending, and they were very radical, very racist against me. They have called me all sorts of names, and when the debate was over, one of the Muslim Brotherhood fanatics attacked me, and he tried to physically assault me. And the security of the conference room in the American University of Cairo, they took me out of the university quickly from the behind doors and put me in a taxi and sent me to the hotel. So this is another lesson for all those non-state actors who think their activities can be in par with any state policies. This is a lesson for not only for the Syrian opposition, but all the non-state actors and even state actors who think they can stand between big countries and their interests. I think in this regard, it is proven beyond any hesitation and doubt that the interests always come first, and then you can even get rid of the closest tool you have against your enemy. So I think if this rapprochement happens between Turkey and Syria, it could happen maybe till mid next year. This would mark the end of the bigger part of the conflict in Syria, and the rest would be solved with the United States. I don't know how, but when the time comes, we will see what are the plans of Syria, what are the plans of Russia, what are the plans of Turkey in this regard. But what is your opinion about this? Do you think the rapprochement is good for Syria? Look, you know my position about Turkey, and my emotion is something, and the interest of Syria is something else. And I would like to see Turkey neutralized from this conflict, because it is in the interest of the Syrian people, and to lessen the suffering of the Syrian people. And as Assad once said, he would feel disgusted to shake hands with Erdogan, but if it's in the interest of his people, he would do that. And I would echo that sentiment and that statement, not because it's President Assad, but if I'm a politician, my number one priority is my people and not me personally. Although Erdogan invested so much in Syria, and he wouldn't have hesitated to murder Assad through his proxy forces like they did in Libya with Muammar al-Qaddafi. So I've been your host, Kirk Almasian of Syriana Analysis. I hope you like my reporting. If you do, please subscribe and hit the like button. It's really great help. And if you want to support my independent reporting, there are so many means in the description below. It's a great financial help to me, guys. Thank you so much, and see you next time.